Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Nutrition Corner. All right, today we're going to be going over hydration. Weather's starting to change, it's starting to get nice out. A lot of people doing some outdoor activities, getting back to being physically active again instead of being cooped up at home. So, hydration. We have a couple, it's not going to be a very long one today. We got some short stuff. Let me see. Oh, I got to fix my window. All right. So, first and foremost, people talk about hydration strategies and strategies for staying hydrated throughout the day. In reality, most people don't need a full-on hydration strategy. A lot of studies have been done where using, like the drink as you're thirsty as a rule of thumb. Technically, thirst is a sign that your body is already in the beginning stages of dehydration. However, it isn't at a damaging degree. You're not going to put yourself in harm's way if you use that as your strategy. However, you may not be operating optimally. So, to that end, because we are trying to do things optimally here, our strategy is going to be trying to avoid feeling that sensation of thirst. And a lot of times people will misread their body's cues. They might think they're hungry, their body's actually thirsty. So if you are feeling that you are hungry on some sort of a diet, try drinking a glass of water first. If that doesn't quench the hunger, then maybe it is actually a desire for food. So, rule of thumb, our hydration strategy. Most people talk about 8-ounce glasses of water throughout the day, so that'll put you at 64 ounces. And that's usually because most people weigh in the vicinity of 130 pounds or so, as the blanket recommendation for having about half of your body weight in ounces of water every day. So that would be the general guideline. That seems like a huge number for a lot of people. So if you weigh 160 pounds, for example, you should be having somewhere in the vicinity of 80 ounces of water a day. So that would be 10 8-ounce glasses. There's a lot of tools you can use to help yourself out these days. Almost everybody's got some sort of a fitness or exercise tracker. They usually have like a little movement reminder on there. Well, if you use that movement reminder as also a reminder to hit certain benchmarks on your water bottle, then that'll keep you ahead of the game. Knowing how much, if you want to break it down by ounces, you're supposed to have per hour, then you can do it that way. A lot of people will just draw lines on the outside of their water bottle to say, by this time I have to be at this line, by this time I have to be at this line, and then so on and so on. So those are our general guidelines that we use for people. Anything more involved than that is you're talking like professional athletes involved in a medical study kind of a situation. So most people don't need to be concerned with anything deeper than those general guidelines, and take the cues from your body. If you have the half your body weight in ounces of water every day, and you realize you're still running to the bathroom very frequently, do that for about a week or so. If your body doesn't adjust to that new level of volume of water, then take it down a notch. So, some common sense rules apply with this one. However, most people are chronically dehydrated. So whatever you're doing, if you feel it's sufficient, probably add one more glass or one more serving of water. And that'll put you at that optimal range. All right. The reason that water is so important, now we all know it's important, obviously. We've been hearing it since we were kids, yet since we were kids, most adults are chronically dehydrated. So apparently we're not getting as much as we're supposed to, despite the fact that we've been hearing since we were kids how important and critical and vital water is. Now, going through our micronutrient little talks, you know that a lot of nutrients are water soluble. So without water as that medium, then they can't metabolize and they can't pass through into your system. So the reason that water is so important is, now remember, all of these chemical processes that are happening involve water, or at least most of them involve water. where we talk about dehydration synthesis, where we dehydrate two molecules to join them together to make a single molecule, or the process of hydrolysis, right, where you're injecting water into something to split it into two different pieces. Without water, neither of those processes can happen, and that is digestion and metabolism. All right, so without water, your body can't digest or metabolize things that you're eating. Water makes up most of the volume of food content, depending on what you're eating. So we have intra and extracellular water. So intracellular is all the water inside of your cells, extracellular, all the water outside of your cells. If you've ever sat down with me to do an in-body assessment, I talk at length about these. In a nutshell, your intracellular fluid is going to be very sodium rich. Your extracellular fluid is going to be very potassium rich. All right. The extracellular fluid, it's going to be interstitial. It's going to be the water in between the cells as opposed to in the side of the cells. All right. So all of the food that you take in, your blood volume in particular is your vascular fluid. All of that water is going to be where most of those nutrients are, or that is where all of the nutrients are once you are digesting and metabolizing food and it gets into the bloodstream. It hitches a ride and it goes all throughout your body. So whatever cells require those certain nutrients, they have their receptors on the cell wall, and those nutrients will find their way into the cells. Right? It is the medium through which most of these reactions occur. So we talked about hydrolysis and dehydration synthesis. Those are just two of the processes to make and break certain molecules. Going back to the water-soluble minerals and micronutrients, without that medium, they can't move around, so they can't find their way to the cell to do what the cell needs done, right? And our body's got multiple sensors located all throughout, all different compartments, all different organs and organelles have their own way of sensing the water level in our bodies, like in our kidneys, for example. Certain processes, certain chemicals and hormones that are produced by our kidneys either are or are not produced based on the more or less blood pressure flowing through that organ. So if the blood pressure gets too low, it's sensed by the organ, by certain cells, and certain chemicals and hormones either are or are no longer produced to balance that problem. So your body's always striving for that homeostatic balance. That's just one example, but there's multiple sites all throughout your body, and there's multiple feedback systems that your body uses to either correct a low pressure or try and correct a high pressure, or just to maintain what it's got. Let me see. And I guess we'll do more of like a PSA kind of thing. So I have my little cheat sheet here. So now that it is getting hot outside, we're going to go over, like, just really quickly, heat cramps versus exhaustion or stroke for heat injuries or heat illnesses. So we say here, so first sign would be heat cramping. That's, your typical muscle cramps or anything like that, but it's more due to a dehydrated status. So we were talking about the concentrations of sodium and potassium before with the intra and extracellular fluid. And it's a similar sensation as to when you eat some salty foods. It increases the concentration of sodium in that intracellular fluid. So because of that concentration, it's either going to push or pull water inside of that cell. If there's more water being pushed into the extracellular fluid, that's where you're going to get the increase in blood pressure as opposed to a decrease in blood pressure. Now, the higher concentration, you might get that bigger pull of water into the cells, and that's going to drop your blood pressure. So things like that, the electrolyte levels can sway your blood pressure. That's why certain medical conditions or certain medications are contraindicated for certain types of foods and things like that, because they're higher or lower in certain electrolytes, potassium being one of them, and sodium being the other. So you get the low sodium diets for cardiac histories, or a lot of cardiac or diabetic patients are warned about their potassium levels, things like that. So heat exhaustion would be your next upgraded level. So you're going from cramps to full-on exhaustion. So that's going to be a rapid pulse, but it's going to be weak. They sometimes use the term thready. So if you try to take a radial pulse, so that's going to be the one on your wrist. If you try to get a radial pulse on somebody, you typically won't be able to find it, especially in the later stage of, or sorry, the earlier stage of heat exhaustion. You might be nauseous, vomiting. Now somebody's going to feel cool. If you put your hand on someone's head, they're going to feel cool. That's because the temperature regulating mechanisms have already begun to break. The skin is going to be cool and clammy, and they'll probably appear pale again. So that's going to be tied into that blood pressure. So with the blood pressure, the reason the heart is beating faster is it's trying to pump more oxygenated blood, but because there's less blood volume, because the lower blood pressure, because of the push of the fluids into the intracellular fluid. All right, and it has all of these cascading effects. So they're going to be excessively sweaty. The sweat may not even be salty because we got that higher concentration inside the cell as opposed to outside the cell. And they may be feeling faint or dizzy. Then we've got our upgrade from there. So if that situation does not get corrected, and you would correct that by getting them into a cool place or an air-conditioned place, not too cold, but cooler than where they are. Room temperature is usually the goal there. And then slowly introducing fluids. A cool shower or a cold compress could be used. But most people don't have ready access to that. If you're finding somebody like outside with this condition going on, just get them inside if you can, but get them into the shade if it would be the best bet. If that isn't corrected, the next step, because remember the body's temperature regulation gauges and sensors and systems are broke, so they will not be able to cool themselves, so their body will overheat completely. This says here, body temperatures can actually rise above 106 degrees in minutes, depending on environmental conditions. But this is when somebody is done sweating. They have no more fluid left to try and evaporate and cool themselves. They will probably already be vomiting. Their pulse will be very rapid, but now it's going to be strong. So the thought process on here is the vessels may constrict so tightly that you would still feel the rebounding of the heart contractions. So you would probably be able to still feel a strong pulse, as opposed to earlier stages with the heat exhaustion where you can't feel it. Their skin is going to appear pink or red. They're going to be almost bone dry, and they will feel warm to the touch. All right, they may have a throbbing headache, but a lot of people in this position won't be in this condition very long. They will probably lose consciousness. This is going to require immediate medical attention and immediate cooling intervention. So this would be where you put a sheet or a blanket over somebody's body and pouring the water on them because you're trying to simulate their body sweating. So that would be the thought process there. But definitely get them inside if at all possible. Call 911 for someone in this condition. And let me see. I think that about does it for today. Yep. All right. So as always, any questions, don't hesitate. Just throw them in chat. I don't know if they turn the chat on for these actually. But you could always email us or send messages. All right. Everybody stay healthy.